He was quite eclectic. He was very keen on Paul Robeson.
Tied to my rocking chair all day, till the day is over.
And he liked the Rodgers and Hart, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Irving Berlin, Gershwin-type musicals. He became quite a good chum of Hoagy Carmichael during the war.
In my heart it will remain, my stardust melody, the memory of love's refrain.
Although from his letters it seems that although he celebrates the fact that he wrote Stardust, he spent rather more time singing rude RAF songs around the piano with him.
It should come as little surprise to learn that Dahl loved performing these risque songs. They were filthy, outrageous and brimming with black humour, just like his writing. While they're poems rather than songs, Dahl's revolting rhymes are similarly dark and naughty, and they beg to be performed out loud.
Little Red Riding Hood and the Wolf. As soon as Wolf began to feel that he would like a decent meal, he went and knocked on Grandma's door. When Grandma opened it, she saw the sharp white teeth, the horrid grin, and Wolfie said, "May I come in?" Poor Grandmama was terrified. "He's going to eat me up," she cried, and she was absolutely right. He ate her up in one big bite, but Grandmama was small and tough, and Wolfie wailed, "That's not enough. I haven't yet begun to feel that I have had a decent meal." He ran around the kitchen yelping, "I've got to have a second helping," then added with a frightful leer, "I'm therefore going to wait right here till little Miss Red Riding Hood comes home from walking in the wood."
Laura Dockrell, performance poet.
Dahl always cheats, which is great. Like, even the "she saw" dragged on to the last line. It's like, he went and knocked on Grandma's door. When Grandma opened it, she saw the sharp white. It's like, I don't care, because it's made to be read, I think. It's just so inventive and innovative, and it is in a whole league of its own to be able to just see language as malleable as clay that you can just sort of play with. The rule breaking is very exciting for any artist. I just think it's heaven on earth.
Comedian and self-proclaimed rock superstar Tim Minchin was captivated by these vulgar verses as a child.
Your love is like fingernails on a chalkboard.
More than the books, it's revolting rhymes. That joy of being stupid with words, of pushing rhymes, of finding the naughtiness in rhymes and stuff, is what my whole career is built on.
The dark humour so evident in Tim's music brought him to the attention of the Royal Shakespeare Company when they began searching for someone who could write songs for a new musical version of Dahl's Matilda. He's loved adopting the arch tone of Dahl.
He sees childhood and reflects it in such a tangible way, and yet he's not writing like a child. Matilda starts with him going, most parents think their children are amazing, but when they're actually little spoilt little bastards, you know, it's really rude. And that my whole musical starts with a whole lot of fat kids going, my mummy says I'm a miracle, one look at my face and it's plain to see. Ever since the day Doc chopped the umbilical cord, it's been clear there's no peer for a miracle like me. Like that, and it's like, the whole thing is like these horrible kids talking about how brilliant they are, and that's what's been so great for me, is because you get to have a little bit of judgment. You get to impose an adult's slightly cynical eye on this world, because Dahl does it himself.
But some of the story's characters lend themselves to song easier than others.
Your mummy's a twit, the Trunchbull bellowed. She pointed a finger the size of a salami at the child's head and shouted, you look like a rat with a tail coming out of its head. My mummy thinks I look lovely, Miss Trunchbull, Amanda stuttered, shaking like a blancmange. I don't give a tinker's toot what your mummy thinks, the Trunchbull yelled, and with that she lunged forward and grabbed hold of Amanda's pigtails in her right fist and lifted the girl clear off the ground. Then she started swinging her round and round her head faster and faster as Amanda was screaming blue murder, and the Trunchbull was yelling, I'll give you pigtails, you little rat. Getting Trunchbull to sing, finding... this kind of Trunchbullness is easy. It's in her name, it's in her build, it's in Quentin Blake's drawings. It's all put on a platter for you, and Mr. Wormwood sort of, you know, he's so cheesy, and Mrs. Wormwood sings this song that goes, "You gotta be loud, loud, loud." Like, it's just brash, and the choices make themselves. But the story is of Miss Honey and Matilda finding each other, these little eyes in the storm. They are quiet, peaceful people in a cacophony of a world. And then trying to get them to sing is really hard because they're not demonstrative. Trying to find Matilda this balance between her being brave and a little bit cheeky and doing all these tricks and stuff, and that she does magic. She ends up doing telekinesis. And one of my briefs was to try and sing a song about that moment where she feels so angry that the power comes out her eyes. What is that feeling? And it took months to figure out what it was. And so the song now is called Quiet, and it's about this massive build. And hopefully it's going to be the sort of most important musical moment in the piece, where this kid's describing this build-up, and the music's building and building and building, and then it just goes into this, like really quiet. It's going to be a tiny kid singing this song about how she gets this sense of peace out of being teleconnected.
Once again, Tim has found inspiration in Dahl's poetry.
I reference revolting rhymes in Matilda. The kids sing a song called Revolting Children that goes, We are revolting children living in revolting times. We'll sing revolting songs using revolting rhymes. We'll be revolting children till our revolting's done, and we'll have the Anyway, I'll not give too much away, but I loved getting the term revolting rhymes into it, because the challenge of turning one of Roald's non-poetic texts into songs and trying to find where the songs might be, in that you have to turn to his poetry to remind yourself of the sense of anarchy and just fun that's in it.
There are clues, not just in his poetry, but in the lyrics littered throughout Roald Dahl's books.
There are very few of his books, actually, that don't contain songs, particularly the children's books. And I think he was longing for those songs to be set in the rambunctious tone that they were usually written.
Since his death, that wish has been realised. In 1996, the singer-songwriter Randy Newman was asked to write the soundtrack for a new film adaptation of James and the Giant Peach. He took a set of lyrics found within the book and set them to music for this boisterous track.
I'm crazy about mosquitoes on a piece of buttered toast, and pickled spines of porcupines, and then a great big roast, and dragon's flesh quite old, not fresh. It costs a bucket most.
Does it come with gravy?
It comes to you in barrels if you order it by post.
Now this is where the relationship between pop music and Roald Dahl becomes even more inextricable. Eating the Peach is a song directly based on his work, rather than one inspired by his storytelling style, yet once again its writer is a rock musician. Those adapting Dahl's stories for the big screen often seem to seek out pop's most caustic and eccentric writers to deliver the soundtrack. As much as Dahl may have hated pop music, it seems film directors feel those with pop or rock sensibilities are best suited to translate the humour and chaos of his writing into music. Be they Randy Newman, whose songs such as Short People share something of Dahl's sarcasm, or Danny Elfman, who wrote the soundtrack to the last Charlie and the Chocolate Factory film. He spent years in a new wave band called Oingo Boingo, who were as bonkers as Willy Wonka.
I don't care what people say.
Wes Anderson turned to a similarly offbeat but very English pop star when he wanted to inject a Dahl-esque quality into a song he'd part-written for his adaptation of Fantastic Mr. Fox.
About a handsome little fox, let me sing you folks a yarn. Hey, diddle-dee, daddle-da, daddle-do-doodle-dum.
Jarvis Cocker.
When he asked me to write Peach's song, it was an unusual situation for me, because normally I'm known for being a lyric writer, I suppose. But in that case, he'd already written the lyrics to that song, and he just asked me to write some music to it. And he'd kind of written this kind of zoopy guy, goopy guy, goopy guy, goopy. it kind of sounded like a kind of hoedown type of number, and I kind of thought maybe he's picked me because I'm the least appropriate person to write a kind of bluegrass hoedown type song ever, being considered quite an English songwriter, I suppose. But I think that probably worked to its favour, you know, because I think although Roald Dahl wasn't English by birth, he lived most of his life here, and his stories are recognisably set in the English countryside, you know, and so maybe getting that kind of a hoedown by way of being filtered through an English sensibility in the end was quite appropriate.
Arguably, the most famous film adaptation of Dahl's work is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Released in 1971, Dahl had what could politely be described as an indifferent relationship with the film.
I thought the film was lousy. Although I wrote the original screenplay, I wrote it just like the book. Unfortunately, it was Hollywood. And Hollywood are not very good at adapting books. You would think if they'd had a book which had been really very successful for many years, that they would say, we better not tamper with it and screw it up.
Nevertheless, the movie has proved endearingly popular, in no small part due to its score, written by Grammy Award winners Anthony Newley and Leslie Bricusse. It even delivered a bona fide chart hit.
I had not read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory until David Wolper, who produced the film, thrust it under my nose. He called me one morning and said, I want to talk to you about something, and Newley and I went over to his house. We said yes to the assignment immediately. We wrote the whole thing very quickly. It wasn't difficult at all because he gave you such richness to draw from. I could have written 25 songs for that score because there were so many moments that you could musicalize. I mean, the Golden Ticket screams to be a song, has to be a song.
I never dreamed that I would climb over the moon in ecstasy, but nevertheless it's there that I'm shortly about to be, 'cause I've got a golden ticket.
And the Oompa Loompas have to have a song.
Oompa Loompa Doompa-dee-da. If you're not greedy, you will go far. You will live in happiness too, like the Oompa Loompa Doompa-dee.
Obviously, there had to be a song about Willy Wonka, and Willy Wonka's not a very good title for a song. And I think it was Tony's idea to call him the Candyman. The Candyman was the worst song of all in the score in terms of what it was like on the screen, because they gave it to an actor who could not sing.
Who can take a sunrise, sprinkle it with dew, cover it in chocolate and a miracle or two? The Candyman. The Candyman can.
And when we saw the film, we were so horrified. It was the only time you ever saw that actor in the role of the man in the sweet shop. And Newley offered to redo it himself for nothing, just so that he could do the song properly. But they'd shot it in Germany and the cast had been dispersed, so you didn't have the opportunity to do that.
The Candyman can.
Sammy Davis had been recording everything we wrote in that era, and we were just lucky that miraculously he did a recording of the Candyman with a young producer called Mike Curb.
Yet somewhat reluctantly, according to his agent Cy Marsh.
He said, are you kidding? Me sing Candyman? I'm going from bad to worse, you know? He said, all right, let's get it done. We go into the studio, and Sammy looks at the lyrics and says, oh boy. And after Sammy did one take, Mike Curb said, I like it very much, but I need one more take. And Sammy looked at me and said, well, we'll sell two. You're going to buy one, and I'm going to buy one.
You can even eat the dishes.
But Sammy had misjudged the American record-buying public. They loved it.
Sammy used to call me every 3 days and say, it's number 8, it's number 5, it's number 2, because he'd never had a number 1 record, and it was something that completely came out of the blue. It was a complete freak success. The last thing anybody in the world thought was that it was a number 1 record.
The Candyman can, 'cause he mixes it with love and makes the world taste good.
So in a story so bizarre that Roald Dahl could have written it himself, the legendary Rat Packer scored his only American #1, not with a song about love or living it up in Vegas, but Willy Wonka.
Hold your breath. Make a wish. Count to 3. Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
Despite its huge chart success, The Candyman isn't Leslie Bricuss's favourite song from the film. That honour falls to Pure Imagination, a track that's subsequently been covered by a variety of pop artists, from Johnny Mathis to Maroon 5.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination.
That's my favourite song in the film score, because the character of Willy Wonka is about using your imagination, and that appealed to me because it was a nice thing to say to children, for children to think that if you use your imagination, you will live in a much better world than if you don't. I'm sure that Willy Wonka reflected what Roald Dahl himself was like. He had such a vivid and wide-ranging imagination, Roald Dahl, that he was so full of ideas. All his stories are full of the most brilliant, exploitable ideas. That it's a goldmine for writers and musicians.
Even if Roald Dahl believed pop singers to be horrible, he'd surely have been proud that his imagination had fed theirs, that they too had delighted their audience with the oddest of characters, the most fantastical of journeys, and stories full of suspense.
He's a master storyteller, up there with the greats.
He helped me to feel enthusiastic about storytelling.
I think he's terrific. He just had that natural storytelling gift.
I would have loved to have known him. I bet he was just such a fun, cool guy.
Those stories, if you've had them read to you as a kid, they stay with you.
Monstrous, gritty, gross tales that will just sort of swerve your childlike imagination to the darkest corners.
They were inspired not just by a children's author, but by an unwitting rock star. Rebellious, provocative and outrageous, Dahl truly wrote in the spirit of rock and roll.
There is no life I know to compare with your imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be.
That was How Roald Dahl Shaped Pop, presented by David Tennant and produced by Chris Walsh-Heron. This is BBC Radio 2, online, on digital and on 88 to 91 FM.